Fauci wrote op-eds in 2011 and 2012 advocating gain-of-function research, which is basically a fancy name for enhancing pathogens in order to study them. And there was two schools of thought in the scientific community. One, led by Fauci, was we should be doing this. The other was, this is just crazy. And, the risk, it outweighs the benefit. And by the way, I haven't heard of any of the benefits of this type of gain of function research. What benefits actually materialize? What learnings did we get from this type of science that actually helped us over the last 2 years of the pandemic? But in any event, Fauci wrote these op-eds. He advocated for gain of function research. These were not throwaway comments by him in front of, a reporter or a congressional hearing. He went out of his way to publish these articles. And Obama, when Obama was in charge, he looked at this issue during his administration, and he banned gain-of-function research. I have to imagine that meeting in the Oval Office took like 5 minutes, because I could just imagine Obama saying, you want to do what? You want to make pathogens more viral, more transmissible, more deadly in order to avoid a future pandemic? What if you create one? And so Obama banned this. And in January of 2017, Fauci and Francis Collins, the head of the NIH, changed that policy during the transition between administrations when Trump didn't have his people in place. You can imagine during the chaos of the administration changing, the NIH repealed that ban on gain-of-function research. And then subsequent to that, they funded a group called the EcoHealth Alliance, a British scientist named Peter Daszak. They funded him to do this type of gain-of-function research. And then Daszak funded this Wuhan lab. And so, look, I think, Fauci didn't create the virus, but he advocated for the type of research that may well have produced it. Yep. And where is the investigation into this by the mainstream media? This COVID is probably the most significant international event that we've had since World War II. And yet anytime anybody wants to raise the issue of the origin of COVID and where it may have come from and the mistakes that it may have led to, it's like, oh, well, we don't need to know the origin of it. That's not really important. What matters is what we do now. Well, I beg to differ. If we want to avoid a future pandemic, we certainly need to know what may have led to this one.
And then virologist after virologist, the world's top, came to him when COVID was first unleashing, and they said, this looks like it came from a lab. This does not look like it had an animal origin from some cave. It's too contagious. It's too advanced. The viruses don't start at this level of sophistication. They have to jump from human to human to human to human for a long time before they get to this point. And there was some sort of private communication, and they all did a 180 without explaining why they did. Fauci's in control. He controls all the grant money. You don't have a career in science or working with the NIH or getting any sort of a grant if Fauci doesn't like you. He sits back there. He collects his, $350,000 or $380,000 a year. It's going to be over 400, I think, when he retires. And he's a kingmaker. But you tell me about the vaccines, because he's obsessed with them, David. He's obsessed. Listening to him, it's like listening to a broken record. He says it in every answer. We need more people vaccinated, more. It's his answer to everything. So why?
Yeah. Well, let me make one more point on Fauci and the timeline about what happened, because we know, based on these emails that have come out under the Freedom of Information Act, that on February 1st of 2020, we know that Fauci and Collins had been advised by a group of scientists that this virus likely came from a lab. How did they know? The exact same reasons we know now, because there's genetic fingerprints. The furin sites in the virus are not naturally occurring. So they had been advised by scientists that this likely came from a lab. And yet 3 days later, by February 4th of 2020, the officials at the NIH had come to the conclusion that it could not have been a lab-made virus, that it had been passed from an animal, the so-called zoonotic theory. And then 2 weeks later...
And let me just say, they were calling it fringe. Then suddenly it was a fringe theory and a racist one.
That's right. And 2 weeks later, there was a PR campaign fed to the prestige media, the New York Times and the Washington Post. I think it was on February 17th, where they all synchronously at the same time published the same types of articles using the same types of language describing anyone who believed in the lab leak theory as, again, like you said, a fringe or conspiracy theory, and endorsing that there was no way that could have happened. It had to be the zoonotic theory. So they shut down the discussion. They shut down the debate. I mean, it'd be one thing for them to say, look, we don't know if it came from a lab, but they didn't do that. They went all in on this like zoonotic theory, this like
they
pangolin
acted
idea.
like guilty men.
That's right. I mean, this was absolutely a stifling, I guess you'd call it a cover up of the official investigation. And for a year, we weren't allowed, and then social media censored on the basis of these officials, and we weren't allowed to ask questions about where the virus may have come from. Mm-hmm. It's also the case, simultaneous to this, you've got Peter Daszak, the scientist who Fauci funded for this gain of function research, wrote a letter to the Lancet, and he rounded up a bunch of scientists making these same points, that any scientist who endorses the lab leak theory is a conspiracy theorist, is a fringe scientist. And that had an incredibly chilling effect on the scientific community and scientists who just wanted to get to the answers, who were pursuing this question in good faith. And so you have to ask, if there was this much cover up, what was the crime?
Yes, Fauci and Collins smeared them. Doctors who didn't go along with the no way was it a lab leak line started to get smeared and diminished. And all along, he's done that. You know, the Great Barrington doctors who said, let's do focused protection where we just prioritize the most vulnerable and not lock down society. Something that we've had studies show did absolutely nothing, did way more harm than good.
Right.
They were smeared and targeted by Fauci too.
Right. And this brings us to the vaccines and the question you asked. Why is there so much vaccine hesitancy or skepticism? I would argue it's not because of misinformation. It's because of distrust. It is distrust that these officials have earned through their actions, through being repeatedly wrong by trying to cover up the truth. I mean, going back to the very beginning of COVID, when Fauci was initially against masks, then he was for them. And his own explanation of why he gave that original position is he said he lied to prevent a run on PPE. So these officials have earned our distrust. That is why people are skeptical. It's an earned distrust. Now, in terms of the merits of vaccines, I mean, I'm vaccinated. I think, based on what I know, I think they've helped me avoid a, more serious case of COVID. But this should be an individual decision. Why? Because we know now that vaccines cannot stop the pandemic. A year ago, I was one of the people who believed that if everyone got vaccinated, the pandemic would end. Then we had Delta, which sort of punched through. And now we have Omicron, which has punched through even more. So it's very clear that even if everyone got vaccinated, it wouldn't stop transmission. It might reduce severity of cases. I believe that. Okay, that's why I got vaccinated. But it cannot by itself stop the pandemic. And that is why it is no longer a political issue of whether people get vaccinated, because there's no externality. There's no health externality. What your neighbor decides to do in terms of getting vaccinated doesn't affect whether you're going to get the virus or not. All the repercussions of getting vaccinated, one way or another, fall on the individual who decides to do it. And so it's time for this idea of making this a political issue to stop. Let individuals make up their own mind.
And it's time for him to go. He has to go. Rochelle Walensky has to go. They've lost the trust of at least half the country. You can't have a public health voice be in that position. Even if you love Fauci, you have to see that once that's happened, he can't. He is no longer persuasive to half the country. In fact, the very half that these Democrats who are dying to mandatorily vaccinate everybody want to convince. I mean, the ship has sailed, I think. They're not going to get them. But in the meantime, what they're doing in terms of the mistrust is then trying to silence voices that put on alternate viewpoints, that push back on the narrative from Anthony Fauci. Joe Rogan's done it. All of us have done it who are in independent media now. It's just that Joe Rogan's the biggest behemoth there is in this space. He's the biggest show that there is and actually his show is bigger than anything you see in cable. I mean, it's huge. So now Spotify's been trying to crack down on him this week. There's an orchestrated campaign to get him because it's like COVID misinformation. Then that didn't work. So then it's like, he's a racist. And then we'll see. There'll be something else next. Neil Young, who kind of got it started over on Spotify, said, I'm pulling my music because of his COVID misinformation. And apparently I didn't know this, but Neil Young has been out there for years, railing on GMOs in food and like giving all sorts of misinformation of his own. Why are we listening to Neil Young for anything outside of how to make music? But he's now warning to the Spotify employees, to the workers of Spotify. I say the CEO, Daniel Ek, is your big problem, not Joe Rogan. Ek pulls the strings. Get out of that place before it eats up your soul. The only goals stated by Ek are about numbers, not art, not creativity. Well, that's probably true. It's probably about numbers. But what's going on, right? What do you make of this targeted campaign against Rogan? And so far, Spotify is pretty much standing by him.
Well, I think we've been talking about it. I mean, I think this agenda on COVID and some of the other things is so unpopular with the country. The only way to sustain it is to stop there from being an honest discussion about it. It's to stop the debate. And who has an incentive to do that? It's the people who've made these decisions, who are in power, who are terrified of being voted out of office. And so there is an orchestrated campaign now to try and silence dissenting voices and anybody who might bring to light the truth on these issues.
Yes, you actually tweeted this out. I love this tweet. The reason our institutions are so broken is that they police for dissent rather than incompetence. Yes, that's so well said.
Right, exactly. You see this on COVID. Like you said, Fauci should be gone. Just based on the fact that he thought gain of function research was a good idea, that alone should be a reason for termination. But he's been wrong so many times. He's been behind every unnecessary COVID restriction over the last 2 years. He has been the main shot caller of our COVID prison, okay? Mm-hmm. He is the guy who's been ruling the yard, telling us what we're allowed to do, where we're allowed to go for the past 2 years. But there is no comeuppance for that. You see this in the military. You've got this General Milley, this botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. It was a fiasco. And where is the comeuppance for that? Where is the punishing of incompetence? All you see is the punishing of any dissenting voice.
That's exactly right. They only punish that one lieutenant.